guys, it's Janie here again to let you know that the next set of patterns for the Fruit Garden Crochet Along are now live on the Starcraft website. It's so exciting that we're now halfway through the Crochet Along and that you will finally start to see some of the fruits of your labour come together by putting the centre part of the crochet blanket together. This set of patterns includes a motif that I called Hollyhock. In fact, it was based on hollyhocks, the flowers, and you're going to make 4 of these. They're a really lovely motif to do, and you're also going to put on your first edging around your central panel. This is my little sample that I've used for the videos. So you're going to do some colour work here where you're stranding yarn across the back of your work to create this nice, I thought of it like a kind of candy stripe pattern there on the edging. It's a really nice edging to do. Well, I enjoyed it anyway, and it's only about 6 rows deep, so it shouldn't take you too long, but hopefully it'll bring another technique into your portfolio of crochet things that you can do. So I hope you're enjoying the Crochet Along. I just wanted quickly to say, a lot of people have emailed me about May Morris in particular, and who was the inspiration for the Crochet Along. And I just wanted to say there's a really good book, here it is. It's called May Morris Arts and Crafts Designer, and it's published by Thames and Hudson. So if any of you want to find a really good book about May, that's a really, really nice one. And I'm sure you can get it anywhere. If you can't find it on websites, then maybe look at the William Morris Gallery, which is in London, in Walthamstow. You can find them online. So that's it really. The following video that I've made focuses on the hollyhock motif, in that I've shown you how to work these background leaves. A lot of the techniques in this piece are things you've already done. So you've got the picots and the leaves, and it's a square motif like the others. So hopefully all the things that you're going to cover in this motif are things that you've done already. So you should be steaming through your crochet by now. I hope you're using the Facebook group. If you've got any little questions or things that you're struggling with, that's the place to go for a bit more help. There's so many people in there chatting about the Crochet Along and willing to give all their advice, so please head over there and get involved in the Facebook group. And I think that's it. That's all for me to say this time. I'm looking forward to seeing you again here in a couple of weeks' time, and in the meantime, stay safe and keep well. So I'm going to talk you through some of the things that happen in the hollyhock motif. I'm really excited to show you the hollyhock because it's one of my favourite motifs in the project. It was one of the first that I designed, so it's kind of quite special to me. So I'm going to talk you through how you work this background framework on this piece, because there's quite a lot going on here behind the flower. But first of all, I'm going to show you how to work these popcorn stitches at the beginning of the motif, and it's quite straightforward, but if you've never done a popcorn before, then this little video might help you. And then, as I said, I'm going to show you how to work this framework behind the petals. So I hope you'll stick with me and have a look. So as you can see from this part of the motif, the popcorn stitches are quite 3D. If I hold it like that, you can see just how raised they are. I used popcorn stitches here instead of a cluster because I wanted that kind of raised effect in the middle of the flower. So I'm going to show you how to do those. In the pattern, the popcorns have been made over 3 stitches. In a lot of patterns, they're made over more stitches than that, usually 4 or 5, and that will give you a really sort of 3D popcorn, but ours are done over 3 in the patterns. So what you're going to do is I've already made the central ring for the motif, so that was 4 chain covered up by 8 double crochet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a stitch that's away from that finishing tail there and choose a stitch opposite. So I'm going to go for that one, going through the whole stitch, and then I'm going to do 3 chain. So I'm going to do 1, that's my joining one, pop my tail over so it joins the yarn in, 2 and 3, and that's the equivalent of my first treble. Then I'm going to do 2 more trebles into that same stitch, and these are completed stitches, so that's 1 and another 1, so that is now the equivalent of 3 stitches. I'm going to pull that loop so it's nice and big, and just make sure I've got my thumb on it so that it doesn't go anywhere, although I've just moved it. And then I'm going to put my hook through the 3rd chain of that first 3 chain that I made, and put the loop back on my hook so that I've got the 2 loops on my hook. Then I'm going to catch the yarn again and draw it through both of those loops, and that creates this sort of 3D aspect to the stitch. So then I'm going to do 2 chain, and I'm going to show you another popcorn now. This one will be a bit different in that we're already joined in, so we don't need to do 3 chain at the beginning. It's just a case of doing 3 trebles into the same stitch. So 1, 2 and 3. So that's US double crochet. Pull that loop a bit bigger and hold it. I'm going to put my hook through the top of the first stitch, so I'm going under the whole chain at the beginning there. Put that loop back on the hook. It doesn't matter if you twist it at that point, don't worry. Then I'm going to catch the yarn and go through both of them. Give it a little tug, and there's my next popcorn. I'm going to show you that once more. 1, 2 chain between. Into the stitch. 1, 2 and 3. Pull the loop, put my hook through the top of the first stitch, catch that yarn onto my hook, catch the yarn again and draw through both and give it a pull. And it's by doing that pull that it kind of creates that real sort of 3D depth to the popcorns. Here's my flower motif. I've done my popcorns all at the beginning here that I just showed you, and then I've done another 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds onto this motif. I haven't shown a step-by-step for this because a lot of the techniques that we've used in this you've done already, so you've already learned how to make picots in previous motifs. In fact, we've done it in a couple already now, so there's no point me showing you the whole of that, but just make sure that you've got 8 petals with these gaps in between the base of the petal, and then that each one has the 3 picots on it with a central one. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to work the background frame that will sit at the back of the motif. You don't see a lot of it, you see a few of the rounds later on when the leaves start to poke out, but I'm going to show you each of those rounds to get you to that point. You need to have measured at this point in the pattern, and I think this should have been something like 11 centimetres across. So just make sure you've gone from the picot to the opposite picot and given it a measure. If it's not the right tension, then just change your hook size and see if you can get it closer to what it should be. Okay, so I'm using Blue Haze at this point. If you're doing recipe 2, you will be using Dusk, and I'm going to flip a couple of the petals forward and find the skipped stitch. It's there, look. I'm going to find that skipped stitch that was made right back on round 3. I'm working behind the petals so I can see the skipped stitch there, but I'm going to go behind it and pop my hook into that stitch there. I'm going to do 1 chain that gets me joined in, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same stitch and pull my tail out. Okay, so this round is quite straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to find the next skip stitch behind that next petal. So I've gone behind the petal there's the stitch I'm aiming for, push my crochet forward, find the stitch and do a double crochet into that stitch. And I'm going to do that the whole way round so that I've got 8 chain spaces. I'm at the end of round 6 and this is already enough to make me a happy bunny, just to see those little bits of blue, the dark blue coming through between those petals. It's the kind of thing I really like when you start to see colours mixing together. So at the front, that's all you can see is just these little blobs, one stitch between each petal. But when you look at the back, you've created a framework of chain spaces. So just check that you've got 8 at the back there. You should have 5 chain between each of them and 1 double crochet. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create the petals, the little leaves that sit behind these. They sit kind of between the 2 petals. And what you're going to do first is do 1 chain and a double crochet at the base of that chain. So that's into that first stitch that we made at the beginning of that round. Then I'm going to do 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm working back along those 6 chain to make the little leaf. So it's 1 double crochet into the next stitch, a half treble into the next stitch, a treble, I've got a bit of a knot of yarn there, right, a treble into each of the next 2, and I think I said stitch, it's actually working into the chain, treble into each of the next 2, a half into the final one, half treble into the final one, and then a double crochet into the stitch at the base of those chain. So that's the same place just to finish that off. Okay, so there's my little leaf. So that was a double, a half treble, 2 trebles and a half treble to make that little leaf, and then 1 double back into the stitch at the base of that. Then I'm going to do 2 chain, 1, 2. I'm going to do a double crochet into that next chain space that sits behind this petal. Oh, I've got my tail there. So just make sure you find that chain space, 1 double crochet into there, 2 chain, 1, 2, and then a double crochet into that next double crochet that sits between those petals. There we go. And that's the repeat. So you're going to make a petal, a little leaf, 2 chain and a double crochet, 2 chain and a double, and then I'm going to start making the 6 chain, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that will become my next little leaf, so that at the end of the round I end up with 8 of these little leaves. I'm going to do that off camera and I'll come back and show you that at the end of the round. This is the motif at the end of round 7, and I've got 8 of these little leaves that sit behind the flower, and they sit between, they should kind of line up with the center point between those 2 petals. And when you look at the back here, you've created another framework here that you're going to use in a bit to make the next little set of leaves. So just make sure when you look at that from the front or the back that between each petal or little leaf, here we go, I do it all the time, get my leaves and petals muddled up, they're leaves. So I've got 1 here, then I've got a 2 chain space and a double, then I've got another 2 chain space and another leaf. So just check that that's what you've got as well all the way round before you start your next round, which will be round 8. I'm about to work round 8, and what I'm going to do on this round is create 4 leaf stems, not 8 this time, 4. And so I'm going to do 1 here at the beginning between these first 2 leaves that I've previously made. So 1 will happen here, then between these 2 there won't be a leaf stem, and then between the next 2 there will be another one, so that we're skipping 1 in between, and that's how we get our 4. So I'm going to show you the first repeat of the pattern. I'm going to join my yarn into the double crochet between any two leaves, and I'm going to join the yarn in there by working one chain and do one double crochet into that same stitch. Pull my tail out like that. So I'm going to make my first leaf stem, and I'm going to do that by doing 6 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and now I'm going to work back down this 6 chain just using double crochet, which is US single. So I've skipped the first one, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 chain to create this little stem. So that's 4 and this is 5. I've got my tail there in the way a little bit, but there we go, there's my little stem. Then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same stitch at the base there, and I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that next chain space. So this is still before the leaf. 1 double crochet into there. Okay, so that's my first little leaf stem. Then I'm going to do 5 chain, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to take those behind that leaf and put a double crochet into that next chain space. So those 5 are now behind that leaf. Then here, in place of a stem, we don't want a stem here, we're going to do 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and a double into that next chain space. So that has taken the place of another leaf stem. So then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 behind the next leaf into that next chain space. There we go, like that. And then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that next stitch, and then I'm ready to start another leaf stem. So I've got 2 leaves from the previous rounds between this one, this new one, and another one. This is what your motif should look like at the end of round 8. You should have 4 of these leaf stems that have been made on that previous round. So you've got 2 that were made in the blue in my case, so that will be dusk in recipe 2, and then you've got 4 that have been made behind those at each kind of corner, if you like. So just check that you've got that right. And then at the back you should see that you've got these chain spaces behind the leaves, that behind the previous round. So if I look at it like that, from that point, I've got a new stem there, then I've got a 5 chain space, a 3 chain space, and a 5 chain space, and another stem. So if I turn it to the next one, I've got a 5, a 3, and a 5. So here I am on round 9, and this is the bit, another bit that I really like is making the leaves. So I'm just making this final set of leaves for the motif, and I'm just going to pull my hook out of there because I'm on my last repeat, but I'm just going to take that out so I can show you the repeat around this round. I've started by joining my yarn into the chain space before one of the stems that was made on the previous round. So I've done 1 double crochet into there, then I've made the leaf, and that's been done in a very similar way to what you've done before. I've done 3 trebles, a half treble, a double, and then 3 doubles at the top of the leaf into the skipped chain, and then I've done a mirror image of that all the way back down the other side. Then I've done 2 double crochet into that next chain space, then I've done 3 chain, a double crochet into the next stitch, and another 3 chain, and then 2 DC, and that's where the repeat then starts again. So if I show you it here again, you've got those 2 chain spaces between those 2 leaves. So just to make that lovely and clear on this final set of leaves, I'm just going to do that final repeat and show it to you. So I've done 1 double crochet. So this is the point at which you would actually join in your yarn if you were at the beginning. So it's the chain space before a leaf, and I'm going to do 2 into there, but when you're joining you just do 1. And then I'm going to work up this leaf stem. I'm going to do a treble into that first one. I'm missing these 2 stitches at the base here, so I'm finding with my hook side of the hook, I'm finding that bit of the chain that's been left behind, doing a treble. Oh, I've just caught it there. Let's do that again. A treble into there, so that's a US double, a treble into the next one, and a treble into the next one. That gives me 3 stitches. Then it's a half treble into the next one, and a double into the next one, and that has got me up one side of the leaf stem. So then I'm finding with the hook part of my hook, I'm finding that skipped chain at the top there, and I'm going to do 3 double crochet into there, and now I'm working back down the other side of the leaf, and I'm doing a double, a half treble, and 3 trebles. 1, 2, and 3. So there's my leaf completed. I'm going to skip these last 2 stitches that happen after the leaf stem and do a double crochet into that next chain space and another double crochet into the same chain space. Then I'm doing 3 chain, 1, 2, 3. I'm doing 1 double crochet into that next chain space. So that was the 3 chain space made on the previous round. And then I'm doing 3 chain, 2, 3. And for me, this is the end of my round, but you would be doing 2 double crochets into this chain space and starting again. I'm doing my slip stitch to finish like that. I'm just going to cut my yarn. Draw that through like we've done 100 times before. And there I am at the end of the motif. Let's just flatten that down a bit. There I am at the end of the motif with my 4 complete leaves at each corner, 8 of the smaller ones in between. So all that's left for me to show you is the rounds that actually make this into a square motif that sit behind these. I will be using parchment and a 4mm hook. If you're doing recipe 2, you will be using, let me think, is it night? Yeah, your background colour, night. It's quite similar to what you've done before. In fact, it's very similar to what you've done before, but you are asked to join these little leaves in as you work. So I think I'll show you that because you might get a bit confused. You've got to join all 8 of these in and you've got to work into the top of this leaf. So I'll show you that over the next couple of minutes. I'm just approaching the end of round 10, which is the first round using parchment. And I just thought I'd talk you through it in case you've forgotten some of the things we did right back when you made the clementine motif, because it's very similar, this one, so it's kind of repeating what you've done already. So I've just taken my hook out so I can talk you through this. What I've done is I've joined my yarn. Here's my join, and it's into the first chain space after one of the big leaves. Just ignore that for now. So I've joined in here and I've done 3 chain. Then I've done 1 double crochet into the next chain space and done another 3 chain. Then I've skipped 1 double crochet of the 2 there that are before the next leaf and done a double into the next one there. And then I've flipped the leaf forward, and this is the bit that's the same as the clementine. I've found those 2 stitches that were skipped here I've found them at the back and done a treble into each of them. Then I've done 3 chain and skipped the stem and done a treble into the next 2 that were done down here. You can see them there coming through. Then I've done 1 double crochet into the first of those 2 that were done after the leaf, 3 chain, 1 double crochet into the next chain space, 3 chain, 1 double, 3 chain, and then a double into the next stitch. So between those new corners that are being made behind the leaves, I've got 3 chain spaces. So if I turn that round now to my last repeat, which I'm just finishing, you'll see that I've got my 3 chain spaces there before my last corner. There's my corner. I've done my DC into that DC made, second DC made after that leaf, and I'm just about to do my last 3 chain, 1, 2, 3, and here I am completing that round. Okay, so I'm at the end. So when you look at the back of your motif here, you should have a gap at every corner surrounded by your trebles, and then 3 chain spaces between each of those. I'm now on round 11 and I'm going to slip stitch into that next chain space. I'm going to do 1 chain and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same chain space. And what I want to do now is I want to catch down this central petal here. I want to catch down that picot. So I'm going to put my hook into the picot, through the middle of it like that, and through that chain space, the same chain space at the same time. And I'm going to do a double crochet into there to catch that picot into place. And then I'm going to do 1 more double crochet into that same chain space. So that then has pulled that petal down into place. I've done 1 double crochet, 1 double crochet into the center of the picot and the chain space at the same time, and another double crochet into the same chain space. So then I'm going to do 3 double crochet into the next chain space, 1, 2, 3, and 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and then this is where I'm going to create my corner out of this corner chain space. So I'm going to do 2 chain and into that 3 chain behind that leaf I'm doing a treble, 3 chain, a treble. That gets my new corner. Then I'm doing 2 chain and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, 1, 2 and 3, and that's created my next corner. Then I'm doing 3 double crochet into the next chain space, 1, 2, 3, and I'm at the point now where I'm going to pick that central chain space and get hold of that picot and pull that in again. So I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that central chain space. I'm going to put my hook into the center of that picot, make sure it is the central one, and go through the same chain space at the same time. 1 double into there and 1 double into that same chain space again. So when you look at that, you can see I've managed to catch down the central picot of this leaf, petal. Then I've created my corner behind the leaf. I've come along and I've managed to catch down that next central picot. So I'm going to do that the whole way round so that I've got 4 corners and I've caught the picot in 4 times. So when I look at my work at the end of round 11, I've created my 4 corners and I should have 15 double crochet stitches made between each of the corners and 2 trebles and 3 chain spaces at each corner. Okay, so I'm going to show you the beginning of round 12, and this is where we start to peg down these little blue leaves that we made previously. I'm going to do 1 chain, and that just gets me to the height of the round, and then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And I've more or less met my little leaf. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to use the hook end of my hook to find the stitch, the skipped chain at the top of that leaf. So you can see I've picked it up. I'm going to do 1 double crochet into there, so that then pulls that into place, and I'm going to miss the next stitch behind that leaf, and I'm going to do, I just have to look at my pattern, 1 half treble into each of the next 2. So when you look at it here, you should see that you've got 3 stitches remaining on that round. So you're going to miss one of them and do a half treble into the next one and a half treble into the next one, and that gets us to the end of those previous stitches. Okay, then I'm going to do, let me just look again, I'm going to do 3 double crochet into that next chain space, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do 2 into, this is my central one, I'm going to do 2 into here, 1, 2, and this is where I'm then going to pick that central stitch at the top of the leaf. So I'm going to do, with the hook part of my hook, I'm going to find that central stitch and do 1 double crochet into there. That's brought the leaf into place. Then I find that same chain space behind the leaf which is there and put 2 double crochet into there, and that has then got my leaf into place. Then it's 3 into the next one, 1, 2, 3, then it's a half treble into each of the next 2, so you're not skipping that next one, you're doing a half treble into there, so it's a half treble into that one and a half treble into the next one. Then you're going to find another leaf, because look, you've met your next leaf. Do a double crochet into the top of there, and again you're going to miss a stitch behind here. Then you're going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 9. So I'm just checking, I've missed that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's pretty much the repeat. I've come along, I've caught in a leaf, I've come along again to the top here and caught in the big leaf, come along, caught in a little one, and then done 9 stitches between there. So I'm now at the point there where I'm going to catch in another leaf. So I'm just finding that chain at the top there and catching that in. So there's another one in there. So this petal doesn't get caught in, that gets left behind. I like the 3D nature of that, that just kind of sits up slightly. But all the small leaves and the 4 bigger leaves are all caught in across that round. I'm going to get to the end of that round and show you what it should look like at the end. So this is the motif at the end of round 12, and as I said already, I've managed to catch in all the sort of flappy leaves that were free range beforehand, and it's now looking nice and square. Just check at the back that you've got your corners right and that you've got the right stitch count. Just make sure everything looks as it should from the back. You'll see that, you know, this is made in a very similar way to previous motifs. I tried to keep them all pretty much the same so that once you've done one, they should all make sense. So as I said already, this is very similar to the clementine motif that you've previously made. So I'm just going to do 2 more rounds and then I'll show you my final motif. So here we go, here's my finished motif. And there was just one thing I wanted to say about this, is that you've got, where we caught the picot in earlier on, because there's 1 stitch in the middle there, that made the stitch count an uneven number, which then meant that as we got to the outside edge of this motif, if I hadn't done something about that, we would have got the wrong stitch count compared to the other motifs. So what you'll find is that on round 13 you're asked to do a double crochet 2 together at the central points over the top of the picot, and then on the final one what you'll do, instead of doing a double crochet 2 together, you'll do a skip, you'll skip your final stitch. So just make sure that you haven't ignored that and ended up with an uneven stitch count along each side. You should at the end have 28 stitches between each corner space. In the corners on round 13 you do what you've been doing before, which is 1 half treble, 1 treble, 1 half treble, and then on the final round you've done 3 double crochets into the corner stitches. And that is the completed motif. As I said already, it's one of my, well, it is probably my favourite one, and I love hollyhocks as well, so that's probably why I love it so much. It was based on a hollyhock which was very common in William Morris and May Morris's garden. So that's it for the motif. You need to make 4 of these, and then you can put your central panel together, which is really exciting because you finally feel like you're getting a blanket. And then you're going to do the first edging, which will go on the outside of these motifs. So if you stick with me, I'm going to show you how to do that next. I'm going to show you the border worked on a sample piece because I haven't got a whole blanket to put an edging onto. So you will have put your central panel together at this point, and all the motifs you've made so far will be part of that, apart from the bits you've done on the acanthus motif. So once you've got all your central panel together, you're then going to do a round in either parchment or night all the way around your blanket, and then you're going to do another round using, I've used blue haze. If you're in recipe 2 you will have used dusk, and what you will have done is at the corner of that round, at the corner of each of the motifs, you will have put a marker into the the second stitch of the 3 at the corner. So that's the point that I've got to, and the next thing to do is to do the 2 colour, almost like a candy stripe border. There's only 2 rounds to do, so as I said already, although it's a little bit challenging, just take your time, and hopefully the steps I'm going to show you will help you get through that. So here you can see I've started my border and I'm doing 2 stitches in each colour. Now the thing with crochet is that when you complete a stitch you are left with a leftover yarn on your hook, and that leftover yarn will obviously be the colour of the stitch that you've just made. So in this case I've made 1 stitch in parchment, and the next stitch is also going to be in parchment, so I'm just going to do the next stitch as well. And you will see that at the end of those 2 stitches my leftover stitch is still parchment, obviously, because that's what I've been using. So if I was to then change to my denim shade at this point, I would get the leftover stitch hanging over the top of the next stitch, which should be in denim. So I'll get the leftover messing up my stitch. So what you need to do when you're changing colour is actually change colour 1 step ahead of when you actually need it, if that makes sense. So I would change the colour, I would do the first step of the stitch like that, and then change the colour at this point. So I'm going to show you that in a sec. But what I've also done is just made sure here that I've got one yarn over to my left here, the parchment, and I've got another ball of yarn, my denim, is over to my right hand side. Now, I don't know what you're like, but I usually, when I crochet, I usually have both my yarns on my left hand side here. But for this technique, it's much easier if you keep one to the right and one to the left, because what you're going to do by having one on one side and one on the other, it will stop you getting a load of twists going on in your yarn, and just will mean that the back is kept really nice and even. If you get a load of twists, it just means you have to unravel your balls maybe at the end of the round or every couple of stitches. So it just takes less time if you keep everything separate to begin with. So I'm going to show you this change of colour now. So I've done one stitch in parchment and I'm going to do another one in parchment, but I'm going to stop at that point there where I've got one more step to do. I'm going to put my parchment yarn down and I'm going to put it down to my left side, and then I'm going to pick up the blue, the denim, and put that in my left hand. So I've just drawn that across the back and just draw that through that stitch so that the leftover yarn on my hook is now denim. So then I'm going to do one stitch in denim and another stitch in denim, but at that point I'm going to drop that yarn back to the left side and pick up my parchment yarn, which will be down at the back here, pick up the parchment and complete the stitch. Okay, so I'm going to show you that again. I'm going to do one stitch in parchment, another stitch in parchment, but I'm going to stop before that stitch is completed. Pop the yarn down, pick this one up, making sure they don't get twisted at the back, pick the blue one up and draw through the stitch. If you're doing recipe 2 at this point, you will have, I think it's umber and parchment you'll be using. I'm using denim and, sorry, you should be using umber and pumice. I'm using parchment and denim. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 stitches in denim, pick up the parchment on that final one and change the colour. So you do one step and an incomplete step, drop the yarn, pick up the new, complete that final stitch, do one stitch in denim, another stitch in denim, and then change the yarn shade again. So can you see when you look at the back there, if you look at my yarns, this one is sitting all the time above the other one. So the parchment is leading under the blue every time I change my yarn shade, and that's just stopping me from getting my yarns in a knot, in a twist. Now I've reached my marker, I've got one stitch and then I've got the marked stitch. So I need to remember that when I get to the marked stitch I'm doing 3 stitches into the same stitch. So I'm going to remove the marker, I'm going to do one stitch into the next stitch, it's just a parchment one stitch into the next one and change colour. So that's one stitch into the corner stitch. Then I'm going to do 2 more because we're going to do 3 into the corner. So I'm going to do 2 more in blue, stopping there at that point and then changing to the parchment. So I've turned the corner, I've got 3 stitches in that corner stitch. So then I'm doing 2 parchment but stopping, and then I'm ready to change to the denim again. Okay, so I hope that helps you understand what you're doing. When you look at the back of that piece, you should have your yarn stranded across the back, shouldn't have too many twists going on, and just make sure it's nice and stretchy at that point because you could have over pulled your yarn at the back. I'm now doing the second row of that colour work, and what I'm doing is every parchment stitch I will work parchment into, and every blue stitch, every denim stitch I will work denim into. So you're keeping exactly the same colour change, and what you'll find is that because of the nature of crochet, you will get this sort of slight angle to your stitches. That's quite normal. It's the way that stitches work, crochet stitches work. Crochet stitches don't sit directly on top of each other, although they do. When you make them, they sit directly on top of each other, but there is always a slight stagger in crochet stitches, so it will look like you're getting this slight angle to your work. When you get up towards the corner stitch this time on this round, you're not going to increase at the corner. So you're just going to do whatever you find at your corner. It might be the blue, it might be the parchment, whichever you find there you mimic, you copy. So I'm just going to do a little bit more of this. I'm going to do 2 parchment, changing yarn shade to the blue. Don't worry if it over pulls, like my stitch there has got a bit big, but it will just go back to size when you pick up your yarn to make the next stitch. So as I pick up that parchment, that will just pull down. So I've got 2 to do here. I'm at the corner there, and then I'm just mimicking whatever colours I found on the previous round and doing them again. Okay, so that's my last couple. Okay, and then at the end of that round you should have this lovely, I really like that, and it is a lovely technique to do, but you do find after a few rounds or a few repeats that you've kind of lost the will to live. So that's why I made you just do 2 rounds, and you won't have this technique anywhere else in the patterns. Actually, it doesn't feature again. So just as I said, just make sure you've got plenty of time and sit and enjoy working through this bit. I'm just going to show you, I'm going to complete this round, and then I'm just going to show you the next round, because you're going to be working into the back of the stitch. At the end of that second round of colour, you should find that you've got 2 stitches in every stitch, in every colour the whole way round. And when you look at the back of your work, you should see that you've got some stranded yarns there. That's like doing, it's like doing fair isle technique or stranding when you do knitting. And as I said already, just make sure that you've not over pulled that, or that it's not really loose. If you've done the colour changing correctly, in that you've kept 1 yarn at the top and 1 yarn at the bottom consistently, you should see that your yarns are nice and straight, and that one is always carried over the top of the other. But it doesn't really matter what the back looks like. Nobody ever looks at the back. It's only other crocheters that ever turn stuff over and look at the back. So as long as your front looks like that, then you're absolutely fine. What you're going to do on this next round is you're going to work into the back loop of all the stitches, and the reason I did that on this round is because it just accentuates that kind of angle that happens on this stitch, on this colour change. So by going into the back of the stitch, it just also left a little ridge behind, which I felt looked nicer than going into the whole stitch. So I'm just going to join, I'm using Blue Haze at this point. If you're doing recipe 2, then you'll be using the colour called Raisin. Okay, so I'm just going to join into my first stitch, into just the back loop of that stitch, and join my Blue Haze in by doing 1 chain. Then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into that same back loop and pull my yarn tail through like we normally do now. And then I'm just going to go into the back loop of every stitch there, and it will just pull that stitch up a bit. It can look a bit loose, but don't worry if it looks like that. It will pull it. You can see there it's kind of pulled the loop right up, but it does just give a nicer effect for that round. So again, it's a round that needs a little bit of concentration, but you can see that it leaves that nice ridge behind. So back loop all the way round, and then I'll show you this border at the very end. So here's my sample at the end of the first edging. I've got all my rounds in, and at the corner here on that final round you need to work a slightly different stitch combination at the corner to what you have done previously. It's what we've been doing on the motifs already. Into the corner stitch you're going to do a half treble, a treble and a half treble, and that just gives you that nice sharp corner there. Don't worry too much if, like me, you've got a little hole at that corner. Mine happened down on that round where I was working into the back loop of the stitch, and it's just left the stitch a little bit big there. But when I wash or block and press this, well, if it was a blanket, if I washed and blocked it, that would disappear. So don't worry too much if you've got a little hole there. So that's it for the video for this set of patterns. I hope you've enjoyed working through the motifs, and I'll see you back here again in a couple of weeks' time when we go back to working on the acanthus motifs. And in the meantime, I hope you're safe and happy, and I'll see you soon.